meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being recorded.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to this forum that is put on by the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign. My name is John Ryman, and I'm the co-chair of our group. Nearly everybody around around the world recognizes the global historical importance of the upcoming election in the United States. This forum will be a debate on whether socialists should recommend voting for a Democrat in 2024 or ever. It will be the first in a series on the upcoming election. We're doing this for two reasons. The first reason stems from the fact that we are the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign. It's true that we have taken up other related issues. For example, we were the first Ukraine support group that took a position opposing Israel's genocidal war against the Palestinians. But still, support for Ukraine was and remains a central issue, both for our group and we believe for the world. And the outcome of the 2024 election may deeply affect the war in Ukraine. Also, as socialists, we don't see the war in Ukraine or any other issue in isolation. I want to stress one point. Many on the left use the Biden-Harris administration's support for Israel's genocidal war as the reason for not voting for them. However, the main point is that almost all of those on the left who use this issue, in fact, oppose voting for any Democrats before this war started. So that is the question which we hope this forum will address, whether it is a matter of principle to never vote for any Democrats. There will be two speakers. The first speaker will be Cheryl Zur. Cheryl is the retired president of Ask Me Local 444. She is a lifelong socialist and is the co-chair of the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign. Cheryl will be speaking in favor of calling for a vote for the Democrats. I must note that the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign has not taken a position on this issue, and Cheryl will be speaking on her own behalf. The second speaker will be Bob Price. Bob is a retired City College of San Francisco instructor, a former San Francisco Labor Council delegate, and a member of the Freedom Socialist Party. Bob will be putting forward the position of that party. He will be speaking in opposition to recommending a vote for the Democrats in 2024 or ever. Each speaker will speak for about 20 to 25 minutes. They will be followed first by questions for factual information or for clarification. And I do mean questions. Please do not disguise a comment in the form of a question. After the questions, the speakers will be allowed to give very short answers of up to 3 minutes each. We will then open up the meeting for a free discussion open to all. Cheryl and Bob have been asked to choose one person who will have a few extra minutes to speak. They are Clay Claiborne, speaking on the side of Cheryl, on the side that Cheryl will present, and Norma Gallegos, speaking on the side that Bob Price will present.
Represent. Go ahead.
They will be called on whenever they raise their hand. Other than that, people will be recognized in the order in which they ask to speak. The discussion period will be followed by a sum up of the two speakers of about 5 to 10 minutes each. They will be speaking in reverse order from when they first presented their position. Finally, a couple of details. Please keep yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Also, we keep the chat function open, but we urge people not to use it too much since it can be distracting from the meeting. That is, of course, except for chat being used for translation. So with that, Cheryl, would you please go ahead?
Sure. Just one comment. I was an industrial electrician. That was the work that I did when I was president of my union. So let's be clear, this debate is not about whether the Democratic Party has ever been or can ever be depended on to advance the interests of the working class and the oppressed. It cannot. What this debate is about is whether we must do everything we can to keep the MAGA Republicans out including voting for the only party that can do so at election time. There is nothing more important than keeping Trump and Vance out of the White House. There is a reason why fascists and authoritarians around the world are intent on destroying the right to vote or rendering it completely meaningless. We should consider that fact very carefully. In this presentation, I will address the following questions. In what ways are Trump and Vance different from past Republican candidates? Why is the Democratic Party now the actual lesser evil? What is Project 2025? Who will be harmed if Trump returns to power? Isn't it obvious that leftists should defend democratic rights and institutions such as a free press? What forces are rooting for Trump and Vance to win? How will a Democratic administration differ from a Republican one on Ukraine and Palestine? And finally, the most important question, which is how can a movement to stop MAGA develop, and what role can socialists potentially play? And what is the role of disinformation in this presidential campaign? In 2007, Naomi Klein published the book Shock Doctrine, which meticulously documents shock therapy, the brute tactic of systemically using the public's disorientation following a collective shock to push through radical pro-corporate measures. Since the rise of MAGA, we have been living through a constant form of shock therapy, where almost every week something incredible occurs that we have never seen before. When Trump was elected in 2016, politicians in big business were shocked to learn that he was not controllable in the way that all previous presidents had been. Quite aside from his extreme narcissism, Trump played the central role in creating and now leading a far-right populist wave, which he is now riding. Just as much as he created this wave, he is a creature of it and is largely beyond control even of the capitalist class itself. In May 2020, President Trump wanted to send active duty military troops to control the growing wave of protests against the murder of George Floyd. According to
Please keep yourself on mute.
According to then Secretary of Defense Mark Esper and other witnesses, Trump was adamant that the protesters be shot. In his last speech as Trump's top military advisor and the nation's top general, Mark Milley said, "We are unique among the world's militaries. We don't take an oath to a country. We don't take an oath to a tribe. We don't take an oath to a religion. We don't take an oath to a king, a queen, a tyrant, or a dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. We take an oath to the Constitution. We take an oath to the idea that is America, and we're willing to die to protect it." If Trump and Vance succeed in implementing the actions outlined in the 900 pages of Project 2025, it will be shock therapy on steroids. They will end government as we know it through Schedule F, which would put 50,000 federal workers under direct control of the president, under threat of being fired. They will privatize everything under the sun, institutionalize white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, and Christian nationalism. Trump wants to take immediate and direct control of the federal bureaucracy, the military, and the Department of Justice. As president, Trump consistently defied democratic norms. He believed and continues to believe that it is right and proper for the president to control the Justice Department, to harass his enemies, protect his friends, to punish owners of independent media, and to deny the possibility that he could ever legitimately lose a democratic election. The fundamental difference between the Democrats and the Trump cult that is called the Republican Party is that the Democrats will maintain what we have, capitalist democracy, or put another way, democratic rights under capitalism. The Trump-Vance cult and its MAGA base, which is today's Republican Party, will unleash an unprecedented attack on those democratic rights. We would see an extreme increase in acts of terrorism carried out by Trump's base. These are the values that the Trump-Vance cult intend to make the law of the land. Vance wants to institutionalize heterosexual marriage and criminalize LGBTQ people as Putin has in Russia. It's all laid out in Project 2025. They will close the Department of Education as it won't be necessary. Public education will be run by private for-profit companies headed by white Christian nationalists. They will arrest librarians who refuse to remove banned books from libraries. They don't need to hide their plans because they could care less about what the majority of people want in this country. They will rule by decree and brute force. they've succeeded in implementing elements of Project 2025. Just look at the 21 states where abortion has been banned or severely restricted. The banning of books in thousands of school districts, the end of academic freedom in Florida, or the SCOTUS decisions of the last few years, presidential immunity, reversal of the Chevron decision, and more. All of these are directly from the MAGA playbook. Trump chose J.D. Vance as his running mate because he trusts Vance to do what Pence refused to do. J.D. Vance is of particular concern because given Trump's age, Vance could end up as president. He represents the most extreme of Trump, but with a strategic plan. The same day that Trump announced Vance as his running mate, Elon Musk announced that he would be donating $45 million a month to the Trump-Vance ticket. Vance is linked to and has the full support of a group of neo-fascist techno-autocrats who have gone way beyond libertarian ideas. These include Silicon Valley billionaires Musk, Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, and others. Not enough people have heard of Curtis Yarvin. Yarvin is described as Thiel's house political philosopher. He is a racist, crackpot, openly contemptuous of democracy, who thinks the United States would be better off as a monarchy. Yarvin supports Russia's invasion of Ukraine. With Vance now on board as VP, Yarvin is positioned to become a sort of Alexander Dugin-type figure in the White House. Dugin is a Russian fascist philosopher and political strategist who has largely shaped Putin's rule. The pre-MAGA Republican Party stood for smaller government, but the MAGA cult now stands for the dismantling of the institutions of capitalist democracy, including a media independent of government control. Who will be the most at risk if Trump and Vance take power? First of all, immigrants and people of color. On day one, he has promised to round up literally millions of undocumented immigrants and put them in detention camps and carry out massive deportations. Raids will be conducted in workplaces, schools, and through door-to-door searches in immigrant neighborhoods. These actions would rip apart nearly every aspect of American life, tanking the economy, violating the basic civil rights of millions of immigrants and native-born Americans alike. These mass raids and detentions will be a useful practice for using military tactics to arrest large numbers of people later who attempt to protest the Trump-Vance shock policies. This is the meaning of the signs saying mass deportation that were waved around at the Republican convention. Racism and white supremacy are at the heart of the MAGA project, which is why 44,000 Black women and 21,000 Black men so far have attended Zoom calls raising funds for Harris. In Trump's authoritarian world, anything that challenges the traditional heroic male roles of protector, provider, and controller of the family is considered a threat to the social order. MAGA seeks to eliminate anyone who does not fit into their rigid and misogynist worldview. Project 2025 will end all protections for LGBTQ+ people. The Trump-Vance traditional values rhetoric incites violence towards LGBTQ+ people. Disabled people. Trump's mockery of disabled people is well known. He considers them less than human. He refused to help the severely disabled son of his nephew. When he was president, he said, the shape they're in, all the expenses, maybe those kinds of people should just die. Vance's philosopher Curtis Yarvin has said that unproductive people should be made into biofuel, as that would be a more humane alternative to genocide. According to the Centers for Disease Control, about 1 in 4 Americans lives with a physical or cognitive disability. There are approximately 7 to 10 million immunocompromised. As of April 2024, there are approximately 17 million Americans living with long COVID who are also immunocompromised. In September 2023, J.D. Vance introduced the Freedom to Breathe Act, which was signed by Biden, in part because of a poll that said Americans were done with the pandemic, even though it continues to cause harm today. From masking to accommodations for disabled people, first and foremost comes profits. MAGA amplifies this drive by seeking to destroy all sense of solidarity. Everyone here knows that overturning every gain made by the women's movement is on their hit list. Reproductive rights will be criminalized and a national ban on abortion implemented. Vance has compared abortion to slavery. He says he will end no-fault divorce. In addition to all of this, a MAGA administration will be a gift to big business. Schedule F, the Schedule F, a Trump-Vance administration will delight big business by putting an end to regulations of all kinds, including environmental protection, water quality, food safety, and public health. The privatization of public lands is also on the agenda. In Project 2025, they say we must go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. A Trump-Vance regime will be one of extreme cruelty, vengeance, and retribution against Trump and MAGA's perceived enemies, which certainly includes everyone here. Shouldn't leftists defend democratic rights and institutions such as a free press? Limited as it may be under capitalism, we still have democratic rights like freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, and freedom to form unions. You cannot say you support democratic rights and then say it doesn't matter if you vote in November, or that the two parties are the same. One of them calls for dictatorship and the other one does not. Dismissing this is dismissing the entire history of workers' struggles to hold on to basic rights. It dismisses heroic African American people, past and present, who gave their lives for the right to vote and organize freely. If you say that the Trump cult and the Democrats are the same today, you completely dismiss their sacrifices. What forces are rooting for Trump and Vance to win? How will a Democratic administration differ from a Republican one on Ukraine and Palestine? Trump is a member of an international mutual dictator admiration club. I will name just a few of his friends who can't wait for him to return to power. Putin is at the top of the list. He has been in power for 3 terms with no end in sight and has turned Russia into a police state. Netanyahu, who like Trump, needs to stay in power to avoid prison. Modi, the authoritarian Hindu supremacist of India. North Korea's ruthless dictator Kim Jong-un, with whom Trump has had a bromance since 2018 when they first met. At that first dinner, Kim told Trump how he had beheaded his uncle for being a traitor and then had the head publicly displayed. Trump laughed and probably thought, good idea. Viktor Orban of Hungary, who has been in power for 12 years, is the role model that American conservatives aspire to more than any other. Some lesser-known members of the Mutual Admiration Club are the lunatic libertarian Javier Milei of Argentina, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, who calls himself the coolest dictator in the world. He has imprisoned almost 2% of the Salvadoran population using extreme police brutality. As Trump has said, dictators know best. Trump has long-standing ties to Putin and Russia. Trump and Vance have promised that they will end aid to Ukraine and facilitate handing it over to Russia. The results will be catastrophic for Ukraine and democracy in Europe. It will be a huge victory for Russia, for authoritarianism and fascist forces around the world. All defenders of human and democratic rights, social equality, and an end to environmental degradation depend on the defeat of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. If you stand with Ukraine, you must work to prevent Trump and Vance from taking power. Many on the left dismiss the idea that there are any differences between Biden, Harris, and Trump over Israel and Palestine. They point out that Biden and Harris support Israel and will continue to arm Israel in its genocidal war against Gaza. Trump's approach can be seen by the comment of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was Trump's unofficial ambassador to the entire region. He said, Gaza's waterfront property could be very valuable. A recent article in Haaretz explained how the fascists in Israel are trying to overturn Israel's step-by-step expansion of the settlements in the West Bank. They want a wholesale and total annexation of the West Bank, which would necessarily mean widespread ethnic cleansing by the fascist settlers, unopposed by the Knesset. The article made clear that they are held in check by Biden and company. Trump would give them a green light. Today, Israel is closer to war with Iran than ever. The Biden administration opposes this. Given Trump's historic Islamophobia, as well as his hatred of the Iranian regime, it seems more likely than not only that he would not oppose such a war, including an attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, he could very possibly join in on it. These are the reasons why, according to a recent article in the AAL Monitor, many Palestinians in Gaza support the Democrats and take the position of anybody but Trump. We should join them. There are also domestic considerations. Trump and Vance would seek to crush any protests in this country against Israeli genocide. And finally, really the most important question of this discussion. How can a movement to stop MAGA develop, and what role can socialists potentially play? First off, if you don't think that stopping Trump and Vance from taking power matters enough to vote, or to vote for the only candidate who can get elected in place of them, then you are not serious about building a movement to stop MAGA and providing an actual alternative to the Democrats. In addition, this is a position of privilege, and it must be said, white privilege. This very arrogant left will be completely unprepared for a Trump and Vance regime. The left is completely out of touch with the working class, ordinary people. I'm talking about the organizations of the left, not the ideas of the left. In 2016, Bernie Sanders received tremendous support because of the ideas of socialism. If Trump and Vance are no different, I'm sorry, somebody needs to mute themselves. If Trump and Vance are no different from previous Republicans, then there is no reason to do anything different from the past. No one but the left thinks this way. This kind of thinking is possible only if you ignore facts, consider Marxism a kind of evangelical religion where nothing is ever questioned, or you exist in an echo chamber. This is why, for the most part, it is completely marginalized and virtually unknown to working class people. It will become completely irrelevant if it continues on this path. But maybe that is a necessary step towards building a new, healthier, independent, democratic socialist movement. Most of the left has been absorbed by campism, and the rest of it is attached to the Democratic Party. The sooner the campus left that supports Putin dies off, the better. Those that hold the view that voting doesn't matter and there is no one to vote for are in terrible company, because that is the exact propaganda being pushed mainly by the Kremlin and to lesser degrees China and Iran. The fangs of their disinformation campaign have sunk deep into American culture, with the left and the right being the conduit. Trump himself is now telling his base that they don't need to vote. Burn the system down, except that the people prepared to take power aren't socialists. They are the extreme right wing of authoritarians and neo-fascists. Organized labor now represents less than 11% of the workforce. Exact figures are impossible to know, but about 50% of Teamster members and 50% of UAW members support Trump. As a former union president and activist whose experience went way beyond my own public sector union, I can tell you that members are alienated from their unions, which they mainly and correctly see as dues collecting agencies that do little to help them on the job. Workers need and want fighting unions. Unfortunately, many of the same left groups and individuals who oppose ever voting for Democrats do little or nothing to build an opposition to the cowardly policies of the union bureaucracy. Thanks to the labor movement here being tied at the hip to the Democrats, with a whole sector of the left participating in that apparatus, we have no independent Labor Party. The outpouring of support to Kamala Harris demonstrates that Americans want to stop MAGA and Trump. What alternative to the Democrats do they have? Absolutely none. The challenge that we face is how to actually build something serious and appealing to mass numbers of people. Difficult, but not impossible. But to do that, MAGA must be defeated. We have seen the outcome of the recent European elections, and they are very mixed. France and the UK narrowly dodged the authoritarian bullet. In the UK, the Labour Party, with all of its flaws, routed the Tories. However, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party won 5 seats, and Farage said, "We're coming for Labour," and vowed to build a national movement. He further said, "This is the first step of something that's going to stun all of you." Farage is in many ways the British equivalent of Trump, so this is an ominous development. And in the last week, we have seen the rioting and fights with police by racist, anti-immigrant supporters of Farage. In France, the trade union movement called for a left electoral front of the Greens, Socialist, Communists, and the Own Bode party, parties that normally have nothing to do with each other, but they kept the fascist national rally at bay. In Brazil, a center-left coalition of 10 parties narrowly elected Lula in 2023 against the fascist Trump ally Bolsonaro. They formed broad coalitions to maintain democracy. It was the same in Brazil when the left united to support Lula and removed Bolsonaro in 2023. But the left in France and Brazil wouldn't have bothered if they didn't recognize that voting and democratic rights matter. There is a whole sector of the left in the United States that does not agree with either of those premises. We don't have the luxury of defeating MAGA like the French. We don't have a parliamentary system. There are no significant parties of the left that run candidates in any meaningful way. In his July 2024 article in New Politics, Green Party co-founder and 2020 Green Party presidential candidate Howie Hawkins argues that socialists should vote for Green Party candidate Jill Stein, who opposes aid to Ukraine and is a Putin apologist. I am calling for no support for any third-party candidate, especially those like Cornel West and Jill Stein who oppose aid to Ukraine. Furthermore, by refusing to distinguish between capitalist democracy and an authoritarian regime with elements of actual fascism, they are encouraging the most myopic and one-sided view imaginable. They are, in effect, encouraging people to commit collective suicide. To the extent that they have any impact, they are a barrier to any movement of workers and the oppressed, and the sooner they collapse, the better. There are activists in the Palestinian movement who insist that Biden and the Democrats must be punished for the genocide in Gaza, to teach them a lesson once and for all that there is a price to be paid for war crimes. This is another kind of magical thinking and denial of what we are facing. It is an insurmountable contradiction to first minimize the differences between today's Democrats and the MAGA Republicans, and then turn around and call for organizing to resist MAGA. That is why the ultra-left is doing nothing serious to build that resistance. In addition to a Trump-Vance regime taking power, we have the MAGA base and its increasing willingness towards open violence. No one knows what will happen at black voting polls in November and after. Harris and the Democrats are not talking about it much, other than Biden's too little too late proposed SCOTUS reforms. But they know that the MAGA campaign intends, through its manipulation of the state electors, to throw the electoral resorts to the SCOTUS, who will appoint Trump as supreme leader. The Democrats' plan is to file lawsuits just as they did in 2020 and before that in 2000. This is the only plan of action that the Democrats would consider as they oppose mass movements. More and more people are rightly worried about this and have no idea what to do other than get a gun and see nowhere to turn to. The starting point is to campaign for a vote against authoritarianism and fascism, a critical and necessary vote for Harris. Union members could demand that their leadership organize community-based committees of resistance that could organize to defend polling stations where needed. There could be the beginning of a conversation about forming a united front of all of those who want to build a movement to defeat MAGA and take off from where the anti-globalization movement, the Occupy movement, and the movement for Black Lives Matter left off. What can be done to defeat the real enemy, which is capitalism? How, through what channels can a movement to stop MAGA develop? The answer is far from clear, but we must be on the alert for even the slightest tendencies and help and encourage those to grow. Of course, those who don't think MAGA Republicans are that different from Democrats rule themselves out of any serious role in doing so. Such a united front would necessarily need to run candidates first at the local level and eventually at the national level. This is the conversation that we must be having.
Thank you, Cheryl. So next we have Bob, and he will also speak for up to 25 minutes. Oksana, are we okay as far as translation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you. We really appreciate your doing that.
It's
Bob.
okay.
Yes, thank you, John, and thanks to the Ukraine Socialist Solidarity Campaign for holding this debate. Again, my name is Bob Price. I am someone who was raised in a working class family by my grandparents. My grandfather was a member of the National Association of Letter Carriers. I worked as a chemistry instructor for 31 years at City College of San Francisco. And as John said earlier, I was an activist in the American Federation of Teachers, 2121, and delegate to San Francisco Labor Council for many years. I've been a socialist feminist for officially, that is a member of the Freedom Socialist Party for over 30 years, unofficially for at least 40 years. And our party is a multiracial, multi-generational socialist feminist organization. So I'll get into our position, which is that I'm just going to go in background and then talk about different areas that we think show that, socialists should not be supporting Democrats. First, the Republican and Democratic parties represent two wings of the ruling class. They're funded by and essentially owned by big business. Their role is to keep profits high for the bosses and wages low for working people, and to limit publicly funded programs that address the needs of our class, which represent the vast majority of people in the United States. Both parties stab workers in the back. The Democrats do it while telling us that they're on our side, the Republicans in a more blatant way. It's a principle in our party as revolutionaries that we never cross the class line, going back to our political forebears, Farrah Fraser, James P. Cannon, Leon Trotsky, Lenin, Engels, and Marx. Instead, we work to build independent working class power, both through involvement in our unions at work, by participating in coalitions and united front organizations with other groups to address workers' needs, by linking up internationally with other revolutionary organizations, by carrying out education campaigns that build class consciousness and participation in the class struggle. We believe the vast working majority has the ability to take power and run society in its own interest, prioritizing human needs, and that those most exploited by capitalism are rising to take necessary radical leadership to break with a destructive, dehumanizing profit system. And among the most oppressed, I include women, people of color, especially Black people who have been at the forefront of every social victory in the US, as well as sexual and gender minorities. It's our class that will move us forward and stop the Trumps and the far right, not the Democrats, whose very job it is to keep us divided, exploited, and without a voice. Some of the betrayals of the Democratic Party that will only continue and multiply if we vote them in. In labor, during Joe Biden's 2020 campaign, he promised full support for unions. Then in late 2022, he worked with the Democratic congressional leadership to stop a planned strike by railroad workers and impose an anti-worker contract on them. Biden, who claims to be the most pro-labor president in history, was joined by most of the members of the squad, that is the Social Democratic grouping, except for a small grouping in Congress, except for Rashida Tlaib, enforcing this lousy agreement on railroad workers. Under immigration, Biden and Harris have bent over backwards to show that they're as tough on the influx of immigrants across the southern border as the Republicans. During a trip to Guatemala in 2021, Harris's answer for people trying to escape grinding poverty, violence, and political persecution based on centuries of US imperialism was, don't come, stay in your country. If we look at the racist criminal justice system, Harris, as the former top cop of California and of San Francisco before that, took a law and order approach, prosecuting and imprisoning thousands of people and backing up police murders of people of color. She opposed criminal justice reform and fought to uphold wrongful convictions. On the environment, although the Biden administration promised to stop climate change, in their 3.5 years in office, they have approved more than 6,400 oil leases and have continued the destructive Mountain Valley Pipeline in Virginia and neighboring states and the Willow Project on Alaska's North Slope. We know that Harris will continue in this direction. On Palestine, Harris and Biden are strong Zionists and back Israel's genocide in Gaza, an atrocity that has now killed over 40,000 people, mostly women and children. By absenting herself from Netanyahu's speech to Congress and by speaking in support of a ceasefire, Harris is trying to present herself as sympathetic to Palestinians, but her separate meeting with the Israeli butcher-in-chief and her unwavering support for funding the massacre tell the real story. Democratic Party mayors and governors around the country have attacked the Palestinian Solidarity Movement and sent in police to shut down the student encampments. They vilify supporters of Palestine as anti-Semitic at a time when the majority of people in the US support an end to Israel's attacks on Gaza. Facing growing grassroots pressure and movement organizing to oppose Biden's nomination and vote for alternative candidates, the Democrats have publicly softened their support for Israel, but the party's policies haven't changed when it comes to funding the genocide. On these issues and others, the Democrats have nothing to offer the working class. Their policies assure only increasing exploitation and misery. Principled socialists cannot vote for them or support them in any way. Instead of voting for Democrats, we should be organizing the growing numbers of people who see them as the deadly choice that they are. I'll have more to say on this toward the end of my presentation. Arguments that we hear put out by progressive and some leftists in favor of lesser evil voting are the following. I'll take two of them, I'm going to say. The first one is we need to preserve our democracy. I know Cheryl didn't say this, but a lot of people who take this position about lesser evil voting in this case, they say we have to save our democracy. Well, it's never been our democracy as workers. The US Constitution was written to produce and protect wealth for the rich white male property owners who ran the country at the end of the 18th century. All the reforms that have provided protections for groups and individuals have come from intense struggles of working people. Millions fought to end slavery, and laborers died by the scores to win unions. And as reforms, such protections can be denied and reversed by the capitalist class, especially when movements are at an ebb. Just look at the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that took away the 50-year-old right to abortion while paving the way to deny other individual freedoms. And the Democratic Party's role has been to pacify, co-opt, and de-radicalize and diffuse movements so that the capitalists can get whatever they want. Two more recent Supreme Court rulings unveil the true nature of democracy in this country. Immunity that gives the president the ability to commit murder, strike breaking, fraud, and abuse as long as the acts are official. The second one is the overturn of the Chevron doctrine that allows regulation of the environment and workplace. These decisions reflect the bourgeois democracy that we live in, a democracy that is built and designed for corporations to do whatever they need to increase profits. What we need is a workers' democracy, something leftists must organize our class to fight for, something the Democrats actively work to prevent. The other major argument that we hear about why lesser evil voting is necessary in this election is that Trump is allied with fascist forces, and we must vote Democrat to keep them from gaining power and growing. The Democrats can't and won't stop fascism. The capitalist class turns to fascism when it sees no other way to maintain the ability to extract profits from the working class. So far, the ruling class has been able to use constitutional and judicial means to keep their economic dominance. As a whole, they have not thrown their material support behind fascists. And the fascist groups, the Proud Boys, Patriot Front, QAnon, Oath Keepers, and others, have not built a mass movement. If and when the capitalists turn to fascism, it won't matter which party is in office. The Democrats won't be able to stop it because they will never take the action that is required, which is building a mass movement of workers, women, people of color, and all the oppressed. In fact, the Democrats fear such a mass movement, and they do all they can to prevent it. Instead, they just tell people that voting Democrat is the solution, and we should not fall into that. Put more Democrats in office will not stop the downward slide of capitalism, which is the thing that leads to despair and the appeal of the far right. So, I mean, our class, we have to have confidence in our class and look at all the victories it has won over its history and that what it's building right now. So elections will not get us what we need to stop fascism. They won't stop the racism and misogyny of Trump that are baked into the US profit, excuse me. These things, the misogyny and racism of Trump that are baked into the US profit system, actually. Leftists calling on a vote for Kamala Harris and the Democrats are giving in to fear promoted by the ruling class. They're showing a lack of confidence in the working class and its ability to fight and win. Putting an emphasis on electing candidates gives the illusion that the bourgeois voting process can lead to real changes for working people. It gives the process more power than it has for our class. It is a distraction from the work that we need to be doing to convince workers and oppressed people that our power comes from completely breaking with the capitalist parties and building a mass movement of our class. Elections are a time when working people focus on politics and take an interest. We need to use this time to do the necessary work of educating and building a fighting working class movement. We see a lot that's positive to build on, and that it's time for optimism, not fear. The working class is gaining confidence and fighting more than it has in decades. We're seeing record numbers of strikes, with workers wanting to stay out on the picket line for as long as it takes to get what they need. Rank and file workers are forming new unions, taking power in many existing ones. More union members are linking workplace issues to social ones. A good example is the UC student and research workers tying their contract fight to the Palestinian struggle. We need to build on the resurgence of the US labor movement and of the social justice movements led by the most marginalized sectors of the class: women, sexual minorities, youth, and people of color. It is the responsibility of the left to channel this energy and militancy into a force that can topple a failed system and defeat fascists. We can do this by building united fronts to fight for our needs and stop the far right. It's also a time to build an independent labor party, both to give workers something to vote for instead of a lesser evil at election time, as well as to be a force for organizing in an ongoing way to advance our rights. Our class is on the move, and it's our role as socialists to be in the workplace and in the movements and lead it in a revolutionary direction. Let's not give in to fear. Let's gather the steam being generated and direct it in an all-out assault on capitalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. So we will now, if there are any specific questions for factual matters of fact or clarification. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Irene, go ahead.
Okay, what I wanted to ask Bob is, okay, so we shouldn't be voting for the Democratic Party. Should we be voting at all? And if so, who should we be voting for?
Okay, thank you, Irene. Are there any other questions? Well, you'll get a chance to answer, Bob. I just want to see any further questions.
Hi, if I may.
Yes.
If I may. Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
I was born in Soviet Union. My parents were engineers. We lived in abject poverty. I mean, Bob, San Francisco college teaching, preaching about socialism. Try living in Soviet Union. Try seeing your family executed in Gulag. Try subsisting.
Nata?
Guys, this is not a joke for people like us who grew up under Soviet rule, under Lenin, under Stalin, under Trotsky, who were forced to learn Russian in school, listening to this is like knife to our hearts. By all means, let's destroy rule of law. Let's destroy everything. And let's install fascists so that we can experience what people in Soviet Union experienced. This is not theoretical for us. We're literally being murdered, exterminated, genocided as we speak. And we're going to sit here and theorize let's build labor movement. Let's build socialist movement. Let's build feminist movement. Let's run socialist candidates. Let's not destroy.
Nata, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. This is a question period. You'll get a chance to make a statement.
Of course you have to interrupt me because I'm a woman. I'm an immigrant. I'm a person of color.
Nothing to do with that.
White man will be speaking over me and telling me not to vote for Kamala Harris. Of course you will do that. This is not acceptable. Paving the road to fascism.
Nata, no, Nata.
John, at what point
Yes, it is. This
am
is
I
not
going to be asked
theoretical
to make a
conversation.
statement?
Calling people to
Or
vote
speak
against
on
their
this?
interests. This is not okay. This will never be okay. Soviet Union will never be okay. Kremlin will never be okay. You cannot call yourself feminist and socialist and advocate to vote against a black woman because she was a prosecutor. How else do you get in power in this country?
Thank you. Are there any other questions? People will have a chance to make comments, but this is the time for questions. And Bob, I see you, T. Court and Enrique. I see, okay. The people that have their hands raised, do you have a question? And you will have 60 seconds to ask your question. If you go beyond that, I'll put you on mute. And if you don't accept that, I will remove you from this meeting. We have a way, we're trying to do this in a structured, orderly way. So go ahead. Enrique, do you have a question?
I have a question. I have a question for the speaker in favor of. Sorry, I have a processing disorder, so I need a little bit more time. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yes. So I have a speaker for the speaker who's in favor of voting for the Democrats. I feel that it is. I want to ask you a simple question. Is it any wonder that maybe someone may disagree with your assessment that voting for Kamala is white privilege when a lot of people of color and a lot of other oppressed folks do not want to be used as a cudgel for the Democrats? They don't want to be used as
Okay, Enrique.
Sorry,
I understand, but what you're doing is making a comment in the form of a question. This is for questions. Enrique, listen to me. Listen to me. You'll have a chance.
John, I have a process question.
Yeah,
I have a process question.
yes, go ahead.
You asked me to have some comments at this thing.
Yeah, that'll come after.
Backing up Cheryl. I'm trying to understand where that is because we're basically launching into the general discussion by having this question session
Okay,
after the two comments.
Yes, hold on, Clay. So this is for questions of just a factual nature. I see people are using this in order to make statements. So we're going to cancel that. Bob, you will have a chance to answer that single question of Irene, and then we're going to go on to making comments. And Clay, you will be the first one in line. You and the other speaker that Bob had indicated will be the first ones in line to speak. So go ahead, Bob. Will you answer that question, and then we'll go on to a discussion.
Yes, I mean, the question was about who to vote for, or should we vote at all? Yeah, I mean, in our party, we always vote for a socialist candidate. We haven't decided who that's going to be this time around yet, but we do that to register basically a protest vote with the system as it is, because it offers, as I said in my talk, nothing for us. and we will vote for what we want, not for what we don't want. As
Okay.
I'm sort of paraphrasing
Thank you.
Deb's,
Thank you. Thank you. So go ahead, Clay. You're next. And Clay, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay. Bob, you've been involved in building the socialist movement for 40 years and building Freedom Socialist Party for 30 years. How's that been working out? Let me say, you don't have to answer now. To me, it's a kind of rhetorical question. I know you have an office in South Central on Jefferson Avenue. It's right next to my barber's office. At least from the picture you publish on the internet, it doesn't appear you have any or few Black members in the heart of South Central, and a lot of members, period. So from the point of view of building the mass movement, I don't see that the socialist movement in this country has had the success that the class consciousness of the people, particularly of the working class, would want it to have. So it makes me think that maybe there's some corruption that could be useful. Now, first I want to address this concept of don't vote for the lesser of two evils. That's been one of the mantras of the socialist movement, or so-called socialist movement in this country for a long time. I think that is basically a petty bourgeois attitude. Workers are faced all the time with making choices between the lesser of two evils. A worker that is privileged enough to have two job offers realizes that both of them are evil. Both of them are capitalists offering to exploit their labor for a profit. He's not going to take the attitude of, I'm not going to work for the lesser of two evils. I'm going to not have a job. I know people in Venice Beach that are like that. They're not the rich ones that are in housing. They're the unhoused ones. And some of those are unhoused because they won't take any job that they feel is exploited, and there's no job available to them that is not exploited. They would rather be a bum, which is a kind of petty bourgeois attitude. The worker will look at the job and say, which job has the best benefits, which job has the best union, which job has the best working condition, which job has the best pay, et cetera, which, and other things that are personal to them, which is closer to my house, where I want to live, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're lucky enough to have a choice between jobs, often they don't. You have to take whatever you can get. But if they're lucky enough to have a choice between jobs, they're going to decide on the one that is the lesser evil. Same with housing, same with decisions that working people have to make all the time. Practical decisions. The people that can stand aside and say, I don't have to make those kind of decisions, are people that are in a privileged position that those decisions don't affect them, or they don't think they're going to affect them as much as possible, as it will for other people. Telling Black people not to vote for the lesser of two evils, that is in fact, tell them not to vote, or to vote for some socialist candidate has no chance of winning, no chance of really affecting their life, and as a result, allowing white supremacists to get in the office is a non-starter. This will not get you any Black votes, and this is one of the principal reasons why this particular socialist movement remains so lily white. And frankly, that's the situation. When you see so many militant Blacks, backing Kamala Harris and building a movement around that, and you're saying, don't vote for her, don't vote for Trump, and in point of fact, in terms of rhetoric and time, most of your time will be spent attacking her, just as in 2016, most of the left, they put their main fire on defeating Hillary Clinton, and there they did succeed. There's no question about it. And to bring up things like the abortion, to bring up Dobbs' decision as an example where the system won't defend us, this is an example where the left won't defend us. Go back to all the left, don't vote for the lesser of two evils propaganda that was put out by the Green Party and the supporters in 2016, and show me where they talked about who would be choosing Supreme Court justices when we knew 3 would be available to the next president. Show me the arguments that it didn't make a difference whether Trump or Clinton, were to choose those Supreme Court justices, where that didn't make any difference to women, where that didn't make any difference to minorities, where that didn't make any difference to the working class. Because the Dobbs decision was a direct result of a proposal by the left. If every Green Party member that voted for Jill Stein in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan had voted for Hillary Clinton, Roe v. Wade would still be the law of the land now.
Thank you, Clay.
And any number of other bad things wouldn't have happened.
Thank you.
If that's the end of my time, fine, but I have a lot more to say.
Okay.
Let me add this also. One more thing I think is really critically important. You talk about the fascist threat and the fascist forces, and you put people of color, you lump all the people, black people, Asian people, migrants, all under the banner of people of color. That is essentially non-white. And you put them after women, sexual minorities, immigrants, and you talk about the threat of fascism. Workers are not attracted to Trump because they see him as a force of fascism. Some workers are attracted to him because they see him as a force for white supremacy. His whole banner, Make America Great Again, is talking about, is promising a resurgence of white supremacy.
Thank you, Clay.
You got to address that directly. You can't hide that behind other terms and other things. You have to address that directly with the working class in this country before we will make any progress. That's essentially a big problem with the socialist movement in this country.
Thank you, Clay. Norma, do you wish to speak at this time? Norma, are you there? Okay, we'll go on then, and we'll come back to you. Raise your hand, Norma, if you want to speak. We're going to go on. Enrique, I'm going to come back to you, but you've already spoken to a certain extent, but you will get a chance to speak.
Ask for accommodation. I was getting to my
go ahead, T Court. Oh, hold on one sec. Okay.
Sorry, I see Norma is still trying to unmute. So Norma, are you okay that I speak already? Because you're trying to unmute, so you should. I'm waiting. I'm fine to wait like 2 more seconds if you want.
No, I
Norma,
don't see. Hold on. Norma, would you raise your hand and I will unmute you? I don't see you there.
Norma Gallegos is the name.
Yes. I'm looking for here for her. Oh, there you are. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. I was being muted there, so thank you. Solid. Okay, yes, I do want to speak. I can see that we're all being, heated, and I think we all need to take a collective fucking breath. Okay, I am on Yelamu, Ramaytush Ohlone land. I am a person of color. I am with the Freedom Socialist Party. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. I organize on a local level. I've been organizing with FSP since 2002. I was like, I don't know, 20 at the time, very young. So all this to say, and just backing up from what my comrade Bob was saying, capitalist democracy, it's not on the side of working class voters. We're giving these bourgeois elections a lot of power. Okay, someone brought up Project 25. Well, guess what? Project 25 has been around since 1492. The California history has been steeped in genocide. Capitalist settlers, pioneers, all these fuckers are doing exactly what they've been doing. Yes, in the Soviet Union. Yes, on Palestinian lands. It is a fact that for indigenous people to not be able to vote or whatnot, all of that is a factor, has been a factor. So for people of color to find liberation and freedom under this system, it's not going to happen. So to give the power to the bourgeois is already defeatist. It's already saying we want them to figure it out for us. And that's not the case. So as my comrade Bob was bringing up some of the things that Kamala has done to the Black community, I have a photo of her and I, in 2005, for counter demonstrating against the Walk for Life, who are religious far right wingers. And yes, they're tied in with the fascists, but she did nothing for that demonstration. She has done nothing for reproductive justice as of that time, since I have been organizing as an organizer with the Reproductive Justice Coalition in San Francisco for this time, that we have been trying to save Roe v. Wade, which we knew was not going to happen. That Roe v. Wade wasn't enough, okay? It wasn't enough for us. Women of color were still being mistreated, shitted, killed in Jackson, Mississippi, or the South. So please, let's talk about, what's happening to people of color right now. And weaponizing identity politics in this situation between Trump and Harris is not okay. I am on TikTok. There's a lot of content creators, young revolutionary Black feminist women who are talking about this. This is where I'm getting that information from. I want to say that with FSP, organizing is what we're about. So in this Reproductive Justice Coalition, as a member, I helped build and really trying to get other groups, other reproductive groups involved so that we can make a united front, essentially. In 2017, after Trump, because he's already been in power, right? We were there at the anti-fascist protest in Berkeley, in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, organizing with other different tendencies. This is what's needed, a united front. The Comrades of Color Caucus that we have in our multiracial organization, after the Obama campaign, the post-racism that everybody said was going to happen, we held race and race relations study groups, reading circles, to discuss that even if you try to get rid or put a person of color in power, that's not going to change anything. Cesar Chavez, for example. All this to say is, look, stop the fear. MAGA Trump, that's Project 2025 has been around forever. You're being scared. That's what the left needs to build itself as a power coming back. 2, build workers, the hope. The fact that we need to do a united front in this time period is an opportunity for us to get together and fight again. Hello. And pushing labor to organize for reproductive justice, because that's what the group Radical Women was doing in June at a press conference, trying to push AFL-CIO Liz Schuler to do an emergency conference, and not just these resolutions that say, yeah, we support women's, reproductive bodily care and trans folk. And then 3, listen to the most oppressed. You want to talk about all the white folk here? What about the young people of color and those who are not here? There are actively disabled folk in this chat. There are actively Black revolutionary feminists who are in the chat. So please, you want to be upset? There's so much more rage that we can channel into organizing. Okay? So please, This is just a Zoom online, but when we're out in the streets together, let's talk, let's dialogue, and let's really see that we're the working class and we need to take leadership, dictatorship, if you will. So let's bring it back to 1492 with what we've got and fucking defeat these fucking fascists and the capitalists. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. The next person is Gemayun Robakov. I hope I got your name correctly. Go ahead. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself, please. We cannot hear you. You have to unmute yourself. Gemayun, are you? Hold on just 1 second. Let me see something here. Okay, try it now. Can you unmute yourself? Are you trying to?
John, can you unmute him like you did for Norma?
I am trying to, Cheryl.
Okay.
John, in the meantime, can I say something?
Let's come back to you, Clay. We're going to go on to let some of the others speak. We'll get back to you. So, Gemayun, you are. Let's see. I don't see you muted.
I just wanted to note that for Norma, that she is using the racist pronunciation of Kamala's name while it was still fresh and on my mind, because I think that's a serious political mistake, whether she's aware of it or not.
Thank you, Clay. Gemayun, we will come back to you. You should be able to unmute yourself. So Walter, we'll come back to you, Gemayun, but Walter, you're next.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I agree in general with Cheryl's position, but I want to emphasize that even in voting for the Democrats tactically, we have to understand the Democratic Party is the class enemy of working people and oppressed people. And everything that Bob and Norma said about the Democratic Party is true. They are our enemy, and we have to be campaigning to point this out. At the same time that we have to tell people you must vote for the Democrats to keep this particular Republican campaign out, because they will deny all the democratic rights that we have been fighting for. After that, Norma said that the Project 2025 has been around since 1492. Yes, the capitalist class has been around since almost then, but things are different. Working people and oppressed people have won gains by struggling over these centuries. Project 2025 would do away with them. And you can't just say nothing. There are no differences between a party that would preserve democratic rights and would not fight against, would not prevent struggles, and for someone like Trump, who would call out the troops to protest everybody, to repress everybody who's protesting against the Gaza atrocity and everything else. So the campaign for voting for the Democrats must include a campaign to educate people about the true nature of the Democrats as a class enemy. I have a challenge to Bob Price and to Norma. You say that it's a principle. You list your Marxist precedents: Marx, Engels, Lenin, Trotsky, Luxemburg, and so forth. You say it's a principle never to vote for the Democrats, or I would presume any bourgeois party. I would challenge you to say, when did Marx, Engels, Lenin, Luxemburg, Trotsky ever say such a thing? I believed what you said for many years, and then when Trump won, my organization investigated that, and we could not find any such statement by the Marxist classical teachers. We did find, quite to the opposite, that in practice they did quite something different. Whenever there was no, of course, they were always trying to build a workers' party, a socialist party. Walter, but whenever there was no socialist candidate that was viable.
Walter, let me just finish the sentence. 5 seconds left.
Fine. When there was no working class a viable candidate available, they said, vote for that bourgeois party that would preserve democratic rights, as opposed to those who would take them away. And we are in such a condition right now.
Thank you, Walter. Next is Rachel. Go ahead, please, Rachel. And we're asking people to keep their comments to 3 minutes. Rachel?
Okay. Again, am I visible?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thanks, Bob, for effectively kind of coming into a lion's den in a manner of speaking. And I wanted to say that I am totally in agreement with your comments about the need for local labor organizing, mutual aid, alternatives to policing, and other activism not directly connected to electoral politics. That said, I hope you don't mind if I make a slight pivot in direction. Given that this forum is being hosted by the Ukrainian Socialist Solidarity Campaign, I've got to ask, what case can you make for supporters of Ukraine that rejecting the Democratic Party is in our geopolitical interest? I mean this as a genuine question. I'm all ears to hear out your argument. Thanks.
Is that it, Rachel? Did you want to comment any further?
No, that's all I wanted to put forth.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rachel. Pete Glosser, you're next. Pete, are you there? Pete Glosser? Okay, we'll come back to you. Matt, would you go ahead, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, cool. Well, first off, thank you, Bob and Cheryl, for your leadoffs, and thank you to the Ukrainian Socialist Solidarity Campaign for hosting this forum. I'm based in upstate New York, and I'm a member of Extinction Rebellion and Socialist Alternative. And if you're familiar with the latter's politics, you probably have a general idea of where I'm coming from. But two main points. First off, I completely agree that Trump poses a massive threat for marginalized communities and working people in general, and that stopping Trump is an essential task. But the problem is that the Democratic Party does not see the same urgency as for the most important election of our lifetime. Quite frankly, I've never seen a party so determined to lose an election as Biden and Harris now work overtime to alienate every single demographic whose votes they need to win in November by continuing to wage genocidal struggle in Palestine, increasing the militarization of the police, and betrayal after betrayal of working people by going back on even their most basic promises from 2020. And working people are rightfully frustrated with the Democratic Party and are desperate for an alternative, something I've witnessed firsthand. And in the absence of a genuine left-wing working class party, many people are looking to the faux right-wing populism of the Trump campaign. So the party that we're looking to stop the far right is actually helping build the far right. So, the longer I think we could continue to capitulate to the Democratic Party, the more we will continue to find ourselves in this position every single election, as, like Bob said, the Democratic Party will never be able to give us anything they see as a threat to capitalism. And then the other point is that I think to feed the illusions of capitalist parties like the Democratic Party also historically ignores the historic role and power of the working class and our role as workers in fighting for our rights and changing society. It has always been independent working class politics that has brought about the rights we enjoy today. And with all due respect to Cheryl, I think the comment that claiming that both parties are the same spits on the legacy of social movements. Granted, I'm paraphrasing that. Correct me if I misinterpreted that. I think that's actually really disingenuous when both parties have always stood in the way of struggle. And honestly, I wouldn't even say that both parties are the same. The analogy I always look to is that it's stage 3 cancer versus stage 4 cancer. Yes, obviously, one is worse than the other, but both are ultimately cancerous and will kill you. Now, where I think Cheryl is correct is that there is no alternative to the Democratic Party, but I would say that this is where our task as socialists must be to act as the living memory of workers' struggle and to build an actual alternative that working people can look to by first voting for third-party socialist candidates, not necessarily because we think they'll win, or even necessarily because we agree with absolutely everything they say, as I know I have my disagreements with both Jill Stein and Cornel West, but because that is a critical first step in order to begin building independent working class politics that can then lead to the creation of a mass workers' party built within the ranks of the labor movement and rooted in international working class struggle. That is our best hope for defeating far-right forces like Trump. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is John Kay.
Thanks. I actually jotted some notes, so let me look. Okay, I've been a socialist. I've been an anti-fascist, anti-racist organizer, anti-war activist, Palestine solidarity activist, and a Labor Party advocate for my entire adult life. And to put it in context, my first vote for president was in 1976, and I voted for a socialist. I've only ever voted for 2 Democrats in the whole time I've been voting, and both of those times I quickly realized it was a mistake. I want to ask why I need to be enthused about a party that is currently funding genocide, and the genocide that I'm actively protesting in order to stop a party that will most certainly continue to fund genocide with the complicity of the Democrats. Both parties are lockstep on their support for Zionism. The Democrats play this game where they say, it's like the old joke, I'll say stop or I'll say stop again. That's not a perspective. That's just the way the Democrats act. Okay, so to support the Democrats in light of the horrors of the last 300 days of slaughter is, I think, to cross a class line in the camp of empire. And if all their political program that they offer is saying, well, we're not the other guys and the other guys are weird, then they've just proven my point. Capitalist parties have nothing concrete to offer working class people except culture wars and name calling because their paymasters on Wall Street don't want them to offer us anything except pain. And so to me, the best way forward is to free our minds from the lesser evil umbilical cord that connects the Democrats to our heads. Working class and oppressed people need a party of our own, not dependent on a twin, and I will say fraternal and not identical twins, parties of capitalism. Of course, they're not the same, but they both answer to the same people. Now, I was a union construction worker for 4 years, and I watched my union subordinate our interests to capitalist parties. And I've seen, and people will say, well, the unions couldn't form a party. However could they win? Anyone who says that has never seen a union get out the vote effort on election day, because I've seen it up close. And it's something it's a mechanism that we use to basically elect our enemies instead of our own people. So to me, the best road to defeating the far right is mobilizing the working class against them. The same goes for the so-called 2025 program. And, everybody's going to say, well, Trump will issue a decree and shoot us down the streets. I think that's bullshit. And I'll just say every game won by our class has been won through struggle.
Thank you. Christina Lee.
Yes, thank you. Since we have been talking a lot about identity and what Black people want, I am a Black and Chinese woman. I am a member of the Freedom Socialist Party and our Comrades of Color Caucus. And it was really kind of frustrating to be told, what I and other Black people want and will do. Just because there are a lot of Black people, Black women in particular, mobilizing for Kamala doesn't necessarily make her the right choice. I mean, I think other folks have done a great job of rehashing the ways in which she's been, harmful to the working class and harmful to folks of color. And, and then the other thing I really want to stress is that I'm really disturbed by the lack of confidence in the working class in a leftist presentation. The Democrats have not protected people of color, queer people, women as effectively as we have protected ourselves by getting out into the street and mobilizing. they are they are basically the illusion of progress or of protection. And to go back to my comment about the lack of confidence in the working class, like I just finished running a study group on the general strike. And, in that study group, we were learning about like all of the ways that workers have been able to succeed and defend our class by uniting in solidarity. And they are uniting in solidarity with other workers, not with capitalists. And just because a capitalist is a woman or is brown does not mean that they defend us. And while we will defend people of color who might be in a capitalist party against misogynoir and other kinds of racist attacks, it does not mean that we need to be voting for them, campaigning for them, giving them money, any of that stuff. And and we also need to push our unions to fight for something better. I don't think that leaning into the same kind of identity politics that capitalists try to push on us is a useful tactic for a overall working class victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tony Byrne.
Hi, I'm calling in from the UK. I'm a member of Workers' Liberty, a small Trotskyist organisation here, and we've been debating the US election for a while now. Originally, I thought we couldn't vote for Biden, and one of the reasons was I didn't think it was in our tradition, kind of Marxist tradition, that we could do that. But it turns out that Lenin advocated voting for the Cadets, which was a bourgeois party when there weren't workers' representatives, Workers' Party representatives standing. So there was one thing. There's also the Social Democratic Party of Germany. They voted for bourgeois parties when they didn't have candidates standing. So a bit of a pedantic point, but so there is a theoretical underpinning to the voting for the candidates. But that didn't shift me actually. Still, but it took one of that kind of props away from me not advocating a vote for Biden. So what I'd say is in 2016 we didn't call for a vote for Clinton. And in 2021, we called for a vote for Howie Hawkins. This year, we're calling for a vote for Biden, because I get it. I'm totally with the people who want to build working class power and so on. I just think you'll make your job a lot easier if Donald Trump isn't the person in power. And also, I think, as Cheryl mentioned when she was listing off all of her all of the people who will be happy to see Trump in power, it'll help internationally as well that we keep Trump out, basically. So I don't think there is a viable candidate apart from Biden to stop Trump, and that's why I've kind of come around now to the idea that we should call for a vote for Biden. Literally, that's all we should do. Yeah, just call for a vote for Biden. Don't work in the campaign. Go out and build those organizations and campaigns that people have been talking about to, build working class confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I assume you're talking about Harris too. Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, hi. I have kind of an intermediate position. I'm not telling anybody who to vote for, but there are certain facts that have never been really clearly debated, and they're being debated here, which is a really big important thing. The nature of the system that we're in, and this is true of all liberal bourgeois democracy. I'm sorry. This is true of all liberal democracies. They're not really geared to defend against fascism, even when a lot of their members want to, like in previous times, and currently the judiciary and the military have been have actually been the strongest opponents of fascism within the ruling class. When we're deciding who to vote for, we have to remember that voting against the fascist party is not a clear defense against fascism, because the opposition to the fascism within the liberal democracy is very weak. They're mostly designed to go after the left. And the other problem is that we need to just look at straightforwardly is that the reason there's no leftist organizations, and there's actually no leftist parties running in this election either. I think the third party issue is totally off the table, but there's no leftist opposition because most of the left supports Putin. I really identified with that young lady who was talking about her parents in the Soviet Union. I hope she's still here. The reason that this debate sounds so ineffectual and almost offensive is that we are the only leftists, or we represent pretty much the only leftists current in this country, along with the FSP, I might add, that opposes Putin. And many of us are not. We can't. It's really hard to organize people on the left when they basically don't care if Trump wins, and that's really the God's own truth. But there are many people on the left that do care. They're not, or they haven't figured out what's going on because it's so confusing. But we cannot burn our bridges with other people because they refuse to vote for Harris. That's one thing I want to bring up in my comment. We have to save all the people that are that can be mobilized against fascism, and gather them together to help defend these elections, to help defend the polls, the vote counters, to help organize committees against fascist violence in the street, anti-fascist groups, and we're going to need everybody. And I think a sterile debate over whether or not we should vote for a capitalist candidate. And I have to say here, I'm voting for Harris. I understand I believe that Lenin and Marx both, and I wouldn't even, and even if they said they wouldn't vote for Harris, I wouldn't care. I would vote for Harris anyway. I just want to, because any kind of leverage or breathing room is more precious than anything else we can get right now. And but we do have to preserve our relationships with people that we're going to need in the coming struggles. And I think the debate is healthy, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Linda. So I have a couple comments I'd like to make. And basically what we've heard from those who oppose voting for the Democrats ever is a lot of abstract truisms and complete failure to analyze the actual concrete present day situation. And incidentally, a lot of those abstract truisms sound very fierce, but they're just simply false, because what they amount to is a denial of the difference between bourgeois democracy and authoritarian rule. They're saying there is no difference. And I would ask them, do you believe that the left in Brazil that united to put neoliberal Lula in power, do you believe that they made a mistake? Do you believe that the left in France that united to keep the National Rally out of power, do you believe that they made a mistake? What do you say to the people in Gaza who, according to reports, say you must do everything you can to keep Trump out of power? What do you say to the Ukrainians who basically what you are arguing is that it makes no difference if the US supports Ukraine or not? In other words, you are arguing for taking that we really don't care if the conditions are established for the complete victory of that imperialist and Russia's imperialist invasion of Ukraine. Then we hear all these fear-sounding things about giving in to fear. That is the exact same thing that the Trumpists and the other conspiracy and anti-science people said about COVID, that you're giving in to fear if you want to wear a mask or get vaccinated. You say with lack of confidence in the working class. Well, you're ignoring the actual real state of affairs in the working class, which is in an absolute crisis. And it's very interesting to me, and I would say both as far as Freedom Socialist Party and Socialist Alternative, that you have done nothing to organize the rank and file at the rank and file level to oppose and get rid of the union bureaucracy, which every single wing of them, including the progressive wing, follows this team concept and makes concession after concession to the employers. You say build a mass movement of our class as if that is, and build a working class party as if that contradicts voting for Democrats. I ran for mayor in 2022 in Oakland as the working class socialist candidate. I campaigned for a working class party. I opposed the Democrats, and I voted for the Democrats in 2020. So there is no contradiction between the two. Just finally, is no accident that these same people who oppose voting for the Democrats do absolutely nothing to actually advocate and actually organize a movement in the streets to stop MAGA taking power, and to insist on the democratic rights to vote. It's no accident, because they see no difference between capitalist democracy and authoritarian rule. So with that, Cheryl, I'm going to call on some of the people who haven't spoken yet, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay.
I just have a question, though. I do have a concrete.
Go ahead. Yes.
No, my concrete question for Bob and the Freedom Socialist Party is that we invited the Freedom Socialist Party to participate in this debate because you are one of the few, if not the only, socialist organizations, identified socialist organizations, that supports Ukraine's right to resist and supports them against Putin. So my question for you is, do you still support Ukraine's right to receive arms from anywhere? And I think this is Rachel's question, which is, how do you see a Trump administration as not being different from a Biden or a Harris administration in regards to Ukraine and Putin?
Thank you, Cheryl. So next is T. Porter. You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, John, I hadn't seen myself. Thank you, Cheryl, for the clarification you just gave. I'm glad actually that I was thrown off the line for a moment, and for clarifying that the FSP members have been invited here for the discussion for the Freedom Socialist Party. I have one question to the members of the Freedom Socialist Party. How do you see organizing and protesting happening under a Trump administration let loose, under a police state let loose, under MAGA let loose, and under 4 more years? That's the first question for the internal United States of America context. To be clear, I'm calling from the Netherlands. My parents are Hungarian, and I grew up in Germany, and I studied German history. The second question that I have is, which something that Cheryl brought up directly, and we may have to do it later. Given the fact that a Trump administration has already lost 4 very valuable years in terms of climate deregulation, and so that greenhouse gases have been going through the roof in the last 4 years as well, so that we are near to the tipping point even more. How do people from FSP see organizing and getting more of a union and a united front in a world where floods and forest fires will increase exponentially? Because it's not only the United States of America that could go into even more political chaos added to the environmental chaos, but of course there's no vacuum. I mean, what is being done, the signals that Trump is sending will be into the European Union, will be into Africa, will be into China, into every little autocrat dictator that wishes to take over corporate oligarchy. I hope that these questions are clear. To finalize, I would like to give because I'm not sure if I will be able to say it again, I would like to remind everybody of the historical times when in the 1930s in Germany, the communists were battling streets with the social democrats in Weimar and in Berlin and in München and everywhere else. And in the end, when Hitler was installed, not with the majority of Germans voting, but installed by the elites of the right-wing elites, powers that be, the first thing that he did was put every single communist and every single socialist into the already existing concentration camps. So the next question is, are those people who don't care about Trump, or who don't care about fascism, are you prepared? Do you have the guns that you need? Do you have the hiding places that you will need? Do you have the exile that you will need to leave the country if necessary? Because you may just end up being rounded up in prisons just like everybody else will. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
I yield.
Okay. Gamayun, I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, yes.
Lovely. I had to change to my phone. I think it's an issue with my computer before. So anyway, I do have a bit of a comment. I did also have a question left over that I didn't get to ask, so I hope I can cover everything. I'll try and be quick. Just quickly, I wanted to comment because I think a lot of what we just heard from several people feels very familiar to me too. It should be noted, I have been mostly politically active in Ireland. And so obviously I don't have sort of on the ground knowledge of what is happening in the US at the moment. But what I see a lot of people talking about is that this sort of vote on most people seem to agree neither party is good. I think someone even sort of compared it to different stages of cancer, and I think I would agree with that. But what I hear people arguing is that a vote for Harris would, rather than be saying, oh, I support Harris and the politics of Harris, it's more so saying, I prefer to organize under a Harris led government than a Trump-led government. And I think, like, personally, I'm very pragmatic in my socialism. I try to focus on how do we get the work we need to do done in the easiest way possible. And I do think the easiest way possible is to do it under a Harris led government, because from what I can tell, and I might be wrong, but from what I hear from people, it does not seem like a third party option is likely to succeed at the moment. Not to say that we shouldn't organize around those, but that it might take longer. And for now, it might be easier to organize around those under a democratic government. Moving on, and this is more specific to Ukraine because I've been involved with a lot of Ukrainian socialists, and I see a conflict that a lot of socialists argue sort of in opposition to sending weapons and other military support to Ukraine, because the argument I see is that it fuels this sort of military industrial complex that I think we've commonly talked about. And that's not wrong, I think, but a lot of Ukrainians I see are saying, well, but we are going to die. We are going to suffer. We need the support. And it feels like sort of saying, no, we can't do that because we have a moral sort of obligation not to support the military and the capitalism that sort of fuels that. I'd be interested to hear both Bob Price and Cheryl Sir's sort of thoughts on this, of like, how can we truly meaningfully support Ukraine? And if we don't want to send the military support, what's the alternative? Like, I don't think Ukraine is strong enough to combat Russian imperialism without it, unfortunately. So yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts and comments.
Thank you very much. John Barsman. John, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
I was forbidden from demuting. Good evening. I would like to thank Cheryl Sir for a very convincing argument. I think the main point to get from that talk I heard today was that we have to focus our campaign as socialists on the threat, the enormous threat to democratic rights represented by MAGA. Cheryl kept on talking about MAGA, and I realized that the other positions lead one to talk about to focus the attack on Kamala Harris and the Democrats, how bad they are, how you can't vote for them. And that I think would be very wrong. Of course, you have to attack the Democratic Party and outline the future for the social movements. But I think democratic rights and defeating MAGA is very important. So that led me, I had been reading Solidarity's position. Solidarity, by the way, just a point of information, some people here don't seem to be aware. Solidarity is a socialist organization in the United States. It might be very small, but probably not as small as the Freedom Socialist Party. And it supports the Ukraine Socialist, the Ukrainian movement for national liberation. And there are probably many others like that. But anyway, Howie Hawkins, Green candidate, now independent, says you should vote for Jill Stein, except in the swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, etc. That leads to the problem I mentioned. It doesn't focus enough on the threat to the democratic rights represented by MAGA. Finally, I have a question. DSA has many different positions. Democratic Socialists of America. It changes positions over time. I don't know what is the present position today of DSA on voting or not for Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next is Theo Chino. You have to unmute yourself, Theo.
Yes, I was not allowed. Thank you very much, John. My name is Theo Chino. I'm the leader of the socialist faction inside the Democratic Party. And the reason I got invited is because I met in 2019 an Ukrainian comrade of the Socialist Democratic of Ukraine. And we have forged a friendship over the last years. And when the Ukrainian war started, when Putin, not the first time, but the second time Putin invaded Ukraine, we just continue in communication. The thing I wanted, and she just sent me a text telling me about your meeting, John. And she was wondering a few questions, and I was like, I don't know, I'm not, and I just jumped on your call. So I just wanted to say two things. The Democratic Party is not a party. It is not. It is an empty shell, like the Republican Party, to be taking over. And it can be taken over by anybody, by liberals, by fascists. And what I'm trying to do, like Mike Harrington said, is to be taken by socialists. And so I realized that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party across the United States is controlled by the liberals. The liberals in New York are the same liberal in Republican state. And they always come up with, oh, we are doing bipartisanship, we're doing this, we're doing that. But in fact, they're the same liberal from either red state or blue state. So I think that's what I learned over the last 7 years of working inside the Democratic Party. And I realized to be an elected member of the Democratic Party, it only took me 40 votes. And today I am at international meeting with the Socialist International, with the Progressive Alliance, with the COPAL, with the Alliance of Socialists from the Latin America and everything, who are people who are in power. And I am explaining them that we, the left in the United States, don't seem to be together when it comes to that Democratic and Republican monster called a party. They are not. So what I can say, and I will not say vote for Harris, vote for Biden, vote for whoever, we socialists, we need to make a personal choice. And it is always a personal choice. But what I will say is that we can change the system if we work the grassroots, like John, you said, like the union are so important. And like the union in Washington State, they call their member to participate in the inner working of the Democratic and the Republican Party. That's what the Washington State Council of Trademen do. And here I feel that if we work together as socialists, we can get that. If we take our fight, all our fight of all our different faction of socialists, and take it inside the Democratic Party, we can take that thing over. And last thing I wanted to say is we don't control what's going to happen. Only 6% of the county of the United States are going to decide whether it's Trump or Harris. If we don't live in one of those 6 states, basically we have no saying in the work. So what I'm trying to do is work for 2028, like draft AOC for president in 2028, so we can have delegate at the DNC when the election comes. Because right now we only have 25 delegates. We only have 25 delegates. What can we do to change the United States over that? So that's all I wanted to say. We need to work together, and I just wanted to introduce myself because thank you, John.
Okay, thank you, Theo. Sam Rubin, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Hello. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but just a couple of things that I want to bring up. First is this the whole kind of phenomenon of voting for the lesser of two evils, as we say, is not a way to prevent the far right from rising for things to become more, farther and farther to the right, as we've seen. And that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make here is that this is a big piece of a very important part of how we ended up in the situation that we're in, where the political spectrum, the sort of like Overton window of what is mainstream politics in this country, has continuously gone farther and farther to the right. We all know this. Okay, like the Democrats of today are like the Republicans that we remember from before, right? And everything is shifting that way, and we're allowing it by voting for Democrats who can just say we're not the other guys. And they can just do that as long as they can just say we're not the other scary ones, and they then vote for us. They'll get people to vote for them, and they'll continue to do the same things, and they'll continue to do the vast majority of the same things that the Republicans do, but not out in the open, so most people won't even know about it. And we've seen this in the last election, and this is also why the argument that getting the Democrats in office gives us breathing room or makes it easier to organize. It actually doesn't, because what we saw in the last election was, people were organizing and getting ready for another Trump, presidency. When he did not win, I remember going to this, post-election protest, and there were a bunch of groups that were going to be there. Most of them just pulled out. They were just like, oh, but Biden won, so we're just going to sit back, pretend like everything's all good, and do nothing. And I tell you what, that period was really, really hard to organize because people were just asleep. They just pretended like it's all good because Trump didn't win. Okay, so this is real, and we have to stay woken up and fight back, and not just be so afraid of Trump. Yeah, he has all these plans that's going to hurt a lot of people. And by the way, I am a disabled person myself, a low-income disabled person myself, okay? And I find it extremely insulting that people who are not disabled are trying to speak for us and say that it's, some kind of a privilege. I'm here. I'm not going to vote for Democrats because, big reason is because of the extra oppression that I have.
Thank you.
Recognizing that this whole system needs to go, and we're not going to pull our punches. And it's time for revolution, not to keep voting for Democrats. And we have to get serious about that.
Thank you. Clay and also Enrique, I will come back to you when after there's two other people that have their hands up who have not spoken. So I'll come back to you after them. And then I think we should cut off the discussion after the four of you speak, and we'll have 5 to 10 minutes for Bob and Cheryl to reply to the comments. So Luma, you're next, and then VJ, and then I'll come back to you, Clay, and also Enrique. Luma, you have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself, Luma.
Got it. Thank you. Hi, I'm Luma. I am with the Freedom Socialist Party, and I think that the one thing that we haven't talked about is the harm that is raised in the Trump out at all costs slogan. I spent a good chunk of my life organizing against the white supremacist fascists in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things one knows about fascism is, first of all, it comes to power on the back of a mass movement. That's who, as I call them, the maggots are. And the focus on Trump alone takes the focus off of those concerns that the maggots and the other folks have. And it's very dangerous to ignore the mass movement. Secondly, the roots of fascism are in capitalism. And if we are ever going to permanently defeat fascism, which I hope we want to do, we have to defeat capitalism. I also, whether you think Trump is a fascist or not, we all agree that there's a fascist movement afoot. I also think that we need to talk about the demoralization that occurs when we tell people to vote for the Democrats. There's a labor movement on the rise like we haven't seen in decades in the United States. And a lot of those people don't want to vote for the Democrats. And here we are on the left telling them to do it. And it's very demoralizing, I think very dangerous. That's my main point. I just want to say that I really object to Clay's earlier comment that the left is responsible for the loss of abortion rights. As someone who has defended clinics and fought for abortion rights my whole life, I really think that was out of line and wrong. I also think that, well, you said you will call on Enrique. I didn't think he understood the format and is being punished for that. But anyway, I've made my point. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we have two people who have not spoken yet, and then we will get to Clay and Enrique. So we're going to ask for VJ and then iPhone. And then I suggest that we go to the original speakers for a reply. So go ahead, VJ. And you have to unmute yourself. VJ, are you there? You have to unmute yourself, VJ. Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm from India, right? I'm a college student in University of Delhi and economics college student, and I affiliate more towards like I'm leaning most towards anarchism, and we are more racist here because we have like some of the Western, as you say, yeah, DNA, because we are insecure as well as uh, we are insecure, and as well we differentiate with people who are more, you can say, have Australite DNA, right? So if like I'm watching this election from India, right? So I might not have the best opinions about it, but I want to ask some of this question to Cheryl. So my first question would be that like there's a uh, on immigration, right? In the case of UK and in some cases in US, there's like in the case of UK there was some. I have to use this strong language because this is a very serious topic. There were Pakistani rape gangs, right? Who rape kids, right? And they were like ignored by the liberal and Labour Party there because they were like very soft on this issue, because if they spoke against the people of minorities or all that. So what would you like? I would like to ask Cheryl, what would you do? Like, what would you tell to working class people who are most vulnerable because of this immigration issue? And also, I would like to point out, because no one is pointing like the positives, as Trump like to say about himself, that no, always everyone's saying negative about him. But I think that Trump also have the most progressive abortion stance in a long, in like as a Republican, and we also see Vivek Ramaswamy as one of the candidates, right? And also one of the problems as an anarchist, I think the problem with socialist uh, ideas is that there's always an oppressor and oppressed, right? So just because you belong to a color, like certain community, you automatically can't be held accountable for anything, like anything wrong you do, right? So second thing would be that, and I think Cheryl just told the things from one point of view. Like she talked about Iran regime, Trump being against Iran regime, but I'm pretty sure if Trump was with Iran regime, she might have saying the same thing. So I'm very skeptical of this. And I want to quote Slavoj Zizek here. Like Slavoj Zizek said that people will turn more extremist towards migrants because of this immigration issue, right? Because it might hurt the working population more and more, right? So like it might make them more extremist in future if people don't, like the leaders don't do anything about it. And same is the case with the like UK state, like Stamer, the UK president, also talk about the new Labour Party, right? Like although like they have started taking asylum seekers as well right now. And the main problem, the question that Cheryl asked after speaking there to Bob, that uh, she asked Bob that should the America stop supplying Ukraine the weapons, right? But I think Trump is more practical on this, because uh, I think Cheryl and all the liberals are using it for their own politics, because I think Trump has the idea that America is slowly going down as the economic superpower, and maybe he understands that he cannot single-handedly what you can stop Russia. So he might want to like decrease the damage, right? So I also want to know about why you think that we should keep supplying Ukraine, or like what are your strategies that if we keep supplying Ukraine the war weapons, so will it stop the war or not? Like what are your future plans, right? Yeah, I mean that's all of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vijay. So we now have two more people who haven't spoken yet, and I really think we need to start to bring this to a conclusion. So we have Mary, and then iPhone, Then we're going to have Clay and Enrique, and then Bob and Cheryl. And I think we're going to have to cut it off there. So go ahead, Mary, please. You have to unmute yourself, Mary. You have to unmute yourself, Mary.
Yeah, the problem is, first of all, you stop the unmuting. We have to wait till you allow it, and then it happens. That's what happened to a few people. So I really don't want to take time here. I'm in Berlin. And I think it's really, really important to see the problem we have with the fascists is not just MAGA, fascist, extreme right tendencies everywhere. I have friends and family living in Manchester. It's really absolutely horrific how the fascists are organizing demonstrations in every city in Britain at the moment. I'm Irish, I come from Ireland, and I always said in Ireland, because of our history, we'll never get a fascist electoral alternative. And they were getting all this vicious stuff on the streets, the Fianna, the New Irish and all the rest, beating up people and doing horrible stuff. But now they have that up to a quarter of the election, saying immigrants are a problem. So there is a huge problem with all this. In Germany, basically, we do not have a left alternative left. So it's very important to see that the left alternative through all sorts of miserable politics, for example, tailgating the government on Israel, for example, making all sorts of concessions on other principal aspects, particularly absolutely going on the streets against support for Ukraine. The left has saddled itself. The major part of a left split went off to Wagenknecht. Those are the red, brown people, hardcore. And the others, what's left, will have maybe 3% in opinion polls in Germany, whereas there's an 18%, 16 to 18% in opinion polls for the hardcore AfD fascists. And in every single case you look at here, I mean, John, if you mention the French did not stand with Macron against the fascists. I think this is very, very important. Now, they made concessions in that they pulled back candidates in Macron areas. I would criticize that. I don't think they should have done that. But the reason they won is because they packed up their differences. They put down small points. Some made concessions in Palestine and some in Ukraine, and they made a packaged left, which won. That's what we should be doing, and that's what nobody is doing. So if you look at the US or you look at Germany either, where we have nothing left, and it's really very hard to know what on earth can happen here. It's really a very frightening situation in Germany. If you look at that, the left has not built. Lots of people in this great debate, and I thank you all for it, has talked about the left stopped organizing after Obama, the left stopped organizing after the Biden vote. Everybody must have known the Biden win did not mean Black Lives Matter and the Rainbow Coalition winning, the Rainbow Alliances. It didn't mean that, but people stopped organizing. So the left has been cushioning, so to speak, to the progressive middle classes, and the progressive middle classes don't dare to fight Biden until he falls off the platform. Now, that's not saying I don't know what to say about a vote in the US. I'm not there. There are other aspects I don't know. One of the strongest aspects in this debate is continuously saying you have to demand of the unions to build resistance, to make statements, to stop, and that means to stop Trump and to recognize what Trump means and how it would attack everybody's rights and so on. But I think it's really important we're talking about our inactivity, our failure to build a movement in Germany, in the EU, in the US, puts us in this position. And then you end up saying to workers who, and some have expressed it very fluently here, saying the Democrats have killed me every time, have sabotaged the progressive movement every time, and now you're asking me to vote for them again. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. The question is, how do you do this vote and still actually organize in a way we haven't done up to now? There's no way our organizing, either in the US and Germany, reflects in any sense the urgency, the climate crisis, the social crisis, the horrific rise of fascism, and that workers can turn to that. And I don't know what the French will do, because we have in our alliance people who are French and they say they don't trust this alliance, but at least it's the right sort of step as a broad left platform demanding that the unions organize on it. I'm sorry if that's more questions than answers, but I do thank you all for the debate. We have an awful lot to do that we have failed to do for like centuries now. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mary. So next we have iPhone. Go ahead, iPhone. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. John, you have everybody forcibly muted, so none of us can unmute ourselves unless you unmute us first. So just a heads up that we cannot do that unless you do it first. Hi, everybody. I am disabled, low income. I'm an intersectional feminist, and I'm an anti-fascist researcher with a focus on Russia. And I work with Syrians, I work with Iranians, and I work with Colombians in liberation struggle and refugee work for context of my politics. And for further context, I respectfully completely disagree with Theo's working on the inside with Dems, but that's a longer story. So I want to just like validate the Freedom Socialist Party and the recognition that there has been genocide since 1492. I agree with the statement that identity politics and putting a brown person in charge is not going to get our needs met, etc. And if we are not strategically operating right now, we are 100% as socialists missing the moment. We are missing the moment. We are also missing the moment because we think this is about MAGA. This is not about MAGA. This is about the new right. This is not a Trump election. This is a Vance election. And for anyone who has not dug in on fascism, on Peter Thiel owning all of our COVID data, on Peter Thiel's relationship with Curtis Yarvin, who wants to liquidate disabled people. Curtis Yarvin has said some people are more appropriate for slavery. Curtis Yarvin has laid out plans to put all of the working class in camps. Those who can work will get ankle bracelets. If you're not independently wealthy, you are categorized as this. We are missing the moment if we do not understand what Silicon Valley is up to, okay? Yeah, Trump is the vehicle. Vance is the real story. Vance is absolutely the real story. And as someone who is disabled and with long COVID and fighting for this for 4 years that we have protections that we need, I would also urge us to really think about our analysis of bourgeois democracy and fascism. Because what we have right now under bourgeois democracy is absolute genocide, but under fascism, there is no fighting back. There is a core distinction where under bourgeois democracy, you can fight. There is a left. Under fascism, there is no left. There's no left. We will not, there is a chance that we will not be here next year. Trump is in favor of mass public executions. Keep in mind, I do not think that if the Republican right gets in, Trump will not survive it. We do not understand totalitarianism and what Silicon Valley is up to. If we do not understand that Trump will be conveniently removed and Vance will be in charge for the rest of everybody's lives. These are the actual stakes right now. This is an actual Soylent Green situation, and people are snoozing on it. And I don't say this with any pleasure because I despise the Democrats more than every single person in this room for their genocide of almost 1.3 million Americans via intentional COVID neglect. And P.S. Trump owns 400,000 of those deaths, but Biden owns the rest. And so I need us to understand that Hitler came to power because the socialists did not understand how to coalition build, and we have to learn that lesson. We have to make a choice to save ourselves. And I agree with every single thing said about building an independent working class party, but we are not doing that in the next 3 months. We do not have the runway. The only thing that can stop Vance and the entire Silicon Valley coming to power and the concentration camps a la Uyghur genocide that they envision and the complete and total exploitation, there will be no left. Everyone talking about fighting back, we will be dead or in camps. There's no left. There will not be a left. We have to understand that. Look at Iran. Iran pretended like, oh yeah, we'll just like let the socialists come out. What happened? Everyone chatting about socialism under trees in Iran after 2 months of the Islamic Republic, they were all murdered. The Islamic Republic murdered 30,000 people. If you do not think that Gaza can be in the United States, it is magical thinking. And if we actually truly give a hoot about Gaza, we have to stop absolutely with everything possible that the Silicon Valley Reich comes to power. Everything. And that is where a vote for any Democratic nom is not by preference. It is 100% strategy, as Walter clarified. Socialists of the past would 100% get behind it. Socialists of the present in Europe understand this. I do not understand why American socialists do not get this, but I also do because I know propaganda and what Putin is up to, but we won't get into that. But I want us to understand that we need power. We need to take power. And if we do not create a Project 2025, which we would do for 4 to 8 years from now, a 900-page socialist takeover document, we're not serious about taking power.
Thank you.
We can actually win back power in 4 to 8 years if we do that. And last thing, if we get a Kamala presidency or whoever the Democratic nom is, we have runway to build. With Trump, we do not. And most of us will be murdered. That's actually what's on the table, and we need to understand that. Look at every single historical precedence of totalitarianism, and please read about Curtis Yarvin, because that is what Vance represents. Vance is Yarvin. Vance is Thiel. Thank you.
So Clay, and then Enrique, and then we'll have Bob and Cheryl. Go ahead, please, Clay. You have to unmute yourself, Clay.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself until you did. I tried 3 times before that, just to be aware. A number of things. Kirk touched upon climate change. I would like to say a little bit more about that because it's very relevant to the election we're facing. I think that a socialist revolution is inevitable provided capitalism is allowed to run its course. The question of whether capitalism will be allowed to run its course is an open one. Because, for example, we've seen this past year, the hottest temperatures on record, and we're going to see even hotter ones in this month of August. Undoubtedly, this is caused by climate change. There are those that don't believe climate change is real, particularly in the Republican Party. In the MAGA movement, others know that this is a real existential threat to humanity, which is not reined in the very near future, will not be reined in at all. So just on the question of climate change, Trump's drill baby drill versus the limited, admittedly limited environmental policies of the Democrats and of Biden-Harris can make a difference whether there is enough runway, in another sense, to have a socialist revolution. And thinking that it makes no difference, that we can ignore very real differences within the bourgeoisie over how to deal with climate change, is to ignore the very real possibility there may not be any socialist revolution because capitalism will be the end of us. Similarly, on this question of the MAGA movement, everyone is talking about the threat of fascism, and that is very real. But what I don't hear talked about is the fact that the real engine behind the MAGA movement and what we're facing now is a resurgence of white supremacy. They are not the same. Everyone talks about the extreme right. These things, again, mask the real engine, which is white supremacy. What is motivating so many people to support MAGA? What are the things that they push that win people to their side? It's not Project 2025. It's not support for authoritarian rule, except to the extent that many people see authoritarian rule as a way to reassert white supremacy. They don't like it on its own, but they will accept it if they feel that a majority of the voters in a democracy are going to be people of color. And as a result of that, they're going to lose out. So not taking up directly and forcibly the struggle against white supremacy, not seeing that as more important than the struggle with fascism at this point. They're one and the same. But we got to speak to the real question that people are dealing with. We've got to speak with the real threat of expelling, 12 million immigrants. To say it doesn't make a difference, it makes a difference to those 12 million immigrants. They will know that whether Trump is in there,
thank you,
or if Harris is in there, it's going to make a difference about that. It's going to make a difference to the people of color in this country, too, to Black people in this country.
Thank you.
And to think for people in the socialist movement to think that they can just mark out their criticism of the Democratic Party where it's Biden, a white man there, and it makes no difference that it's Harris, a Black Asian woman, doesn't deal with the fact that even the change in personnel at the top raises new questions, particularly around this question of white supremacy. And excuse me, but I'm not finished yet. I want to say a little bit more on this. Not working within the movement to defeat MAGA, defeat Trump, and elect Harris is not to work within the most important mass movement going on between now and November. Not advocating for the defeat of MAGA at this time, and in this way, the only way that can be effective, hamstrings anybody that thinks that they can play a leading role or any significant role in the struggle against Trump and MAGA, which is going to take place irregardless of who wins the election in terms of vote count, because they clearly are intent on carrying their insurrection beyond the election, regardless of that outcome. But to think that you're going to stand outside of that between now and November and mainly criticize Harris or mainly criticize the Democrats and then be the champion of the working people after that in the struggle against fascism and white supremacy is missing the point of how organically things really develop.
Thank you, Clay. So, Enrique?
Mute myself. I can't.
You're on mute.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak once again. I wanted to mention something. A lot of people here who are supporting Miss Harris being elected to president are constantly bringing up a man named Curtis Yarvin, aka Mencius Moldbug, and I really do think that that's really important to realize. And I want to quote him directly. He said that it doesn't matter if Trump wins because the main power of right-wing agitation is in the direct action of the fascists themselves. Do you know what this means? This means we are telling people in the South, we are telling people in Bakersfield, we are telling people in Reading, queer people, Black people, Latino people, that they should vote for something that really won't change their situation. I would like people who are advocating for Miss Harris to win to go to Bakersfield, which is in a blue state, and tell them, oh, your situation will change. No, if we are going to engage in electoralism to change people's lives, it needs to be at a local level. If we are going to combat fascism, it needs to be directly. We cannot act like Democrats and fall into weird conspiracy theories like Project 2025. They've been doing things like world building an ideal Christian nationalist world. But the thing is, the banality of evil is here. Project 2025 is Project 1492. We have to understand that. Number two, we cannot fall into ideas of fear and understand and believe that because if you don't vote for Democrats, you are evil and you do not want to protect trans people. I want to protect trans people. Why don't we actually change trans people's lives by building underground situations where you can get trans kids out of the South or out of Bakersfield or out of Reading? Why don't we do that? You want to tell people like that to vote for Biden, and you are spitting in their face. You want to tell people who are Palestinian Americans to vote for someone who will bomb Gaza like one bomb less. Tell them that. I would love for you guys who claim to be leftists to get out of your bubble and actually speak to people who you claim to be speaking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. Okay, so now we'll have Bob and then Cheryl, and they will speak for a little over, like between 5 and 10 minutes. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, all right. So I'm just looking back at some of the questions people raised rather. Yes. So, well, first of all, I'll go with questions first, and I'll just give an overview. Right. So Cheryl asked, do we still support Ukraine getting arms from anywhere? Yes, we do believe that the Ukrainian people have a right to defend themselves. And in terms of the election, well, I don't see any less danger with the Democrats in power for the Ukrainians as they do for the Republicans. It all depends on us building a movement here that defends working people. In terms of, I think it was T. Court's question, how do we see organizing under Trump with police state set loose? How do we organize in the union when the environmental crisis is destroying everything? Well, again, so first on the police state and Trump, I think it goes back to what some speakers said, including myself, about confidence in the working class to respond to something like a Trump and MAGA attempt to implement a police state. I mean, if Trump were elected, I don't think the working class is just going to sit back and do nothing about it. There will be huge demonstrations to stop that kind of an agenda. And in terms of the left needs to work together. I mean, here we're talking two different supposedly left points of view, and yet everyone here, I think, supports the right of the Ukrainians to defend themselves. So we have something in common that we can form a united front on and work against Trump, the right wing, together. I mean, and that's what we need to be doing more of. And our party has been involved in doing that. I resent John saying that the Freedom Socialist Party hasn't been organizing in its workplaces or in its unions among the rank and file to challenge the bureaucrats in our unions. We have a history of doing that. Someone is in the water department at San Francisco. They've challenged management on a number of issues. In my union, we fought against, keeping silent when they're trying to destroy the college that I was working at. There are a lot of examples. So, John, I don't know where you got that from. So again, to me, the environmental issue, again, socialists that I know at least see the environmentalism linked in directly with needing to change the system and joining together as a working class to defeat capitalism so that we can take care of the environment. So again, my overall message that I want to give here is we have confidence in the working class. We think the working class is on the rise, has been on the rise in the last couple of years in a way that it hasn't been for decades, and that we need to keep building on that. And the left itself needs to see that, and the left needs to come together. The left has been very small and divided. And so, yes, our left groups are all too small, each one of them, to do anything to make a significant change. So it really involves the need to regroup left forces and unite across differences in united fronts and in a Labor Party, and to work with other leftists internationally. As people pointed out, the right wing is on the rise internationally, and we need to link our efforts to confront it here as well as confronting it abroad in a unified and coordinated way. That's it.
Thank you. Cheryl? Cheryl, you have to unmute yourself, please. Cheryl, you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, there's a message that pops up that says the host is not authorizing people to unmute. So in any case, I'm unmuted now. Where to begin? So I guess first off, I think one of the most important things about today is that what we did here today is very unusual. There is rarely open debates, democratic debates in the left. And it's one of the reasons why ordinary working people don't really want to have anything to do with the left, because they see it as just these sort of organizations who spout rhetoric and don't really engage in these kind of debates. Anyhow, this is very important. It's shocking that there is not more of a debate, more other organizations or more debates on the question of the elections and all the related issues. We need more of that. Second of all, I could have given Bob's presentation and then given mine, because my entire life, so I was a socialist candidate for governor in the 1980s in California. I advocated for a Labor Party in all of my union activism and all of my years in office, and just as a steward, including going to the Labor Party founding convention in Cincinnati, no, Cleveland, excuse me. In any case, so I don't have any disagreement about what the Democratic Party represents, but we do have a strong disagreement about the fact that the situation that we're in today is absolutely unprecedented. And anybody who denies that is not looking at facts. And I want to address the question of fear versus confidence in the working class. I think that if you're not afraid of what could happen or what is coming, regardless of what happens in November, then I think that you're living in a dream world. I have to say that. People who aren't afraid are living in a different planet than the one I'm living on. The related question of confidence in the working class, for me, Marxism and socialism it's not a religion. I don't have confidence or not have confidence in the working class because the working class is magically imbued with that they're going to one day rise up magically and overthrow capitalism. I hope that happens, and I'm going to keep fighting to my last breath that happens. But it's not inevitable. It's not written anywhere in the Bible of Marxism that the working class shall. The working class, it's working class consciousness in the United States has been set back in spite of all the attempts to organize unions that are going on right now. The consciousness of workers organizing unions has been thrown back decades. As John likes to say, it's the result of a 75-year war against the militant traditions of the working class. And those have got to be revived before we've got a chance at anything. And they've been consciously destroyed and pushed back against by the leadership of the unions and the vast nonprofit sector and all of the mechanisms that have replaced what we can only say were much more of a mass movement, I would say, in the 1930s. So we are in an absolutely terrible situation. Never in my life did I think that I would be saying, yes, the Democrats really are the lesser of the two evils. But I believe that absolutely 100% now. I will be voting for Kamala Harris, and I will be telling people I don't support the Democratic Party. I'm simply trying to get us a moment's breath to see if we and everybody that can be united against white supremacy, as Clay pointed out, and the authoritarian movements that are growing in this country and the world can be stopped. What can we do to organize that? That's all. That's what I am advocating for, is a delay, a momentary stop in this very terrifying, terrible process. And again, as I think, yes, as Walter challenged people to answer here, there's nothing in Marxist or socialist history that's written like in the Bible and the Old Testament that thou shalt never vote for a bourgeois candidate. No. What makes sense given the facts of a given situation? I mean, people came from all around the world to support the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War, to defeat fascism and support a capitalist government. They gave their lives for that. In any case, I think that socialists need to learn different ways to talk to working class people. People aren't interested in listening to rhetoric. And I think that the echo chamber of the socialist movement has done a lot of damage in that regard. So yeah, we need to have a lot more discussion on this because we don't have all the answers. Things are very, very unclear about in what way can we stop this authoritarian movement that is international. And we're very, very marginalized. And again, yeah, I'm going to end on one last note. I couldn't, my original presentation was twice as long. I had to cut it in half. It was really painful for me to leave out a lot of things. And one of the things that I would have talked about a lot more was disinformation. If you are on social media, you will see the vast amount of disinformation out there. And it includes the rhetoric about not voting, voting doesn't matter, and the two candidates are the same. Where is that coming from? It's coming from the Kremlin. That is where it's coming from. So I think everybody here needs to be very careful to delineate. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And that concludes our meeting. We have regular forums out once a month. We're going to be having ones in the future, one on an international perspective, with speakers from countries outside the United States on how they view the coming election here. We're also going to have one on how and why the MAGA, Trump, Vance movement developed, and really what in reality is a crisis in the working class. That includes the 75-year war conducted by the entire union leadership against all the best traditions of the U.S. labor movement. So thanks everybody for joining and participating. And if you want to get on our email list, either send me personally your email address or type it below in the chat. So that.
John, can I say one thing? So yeah. Just the recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube channel. Right. And at some point we'll be publishing my entire presentation, which, as I said, was a lot longer.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to stop the recording.